The decision to grant Novak Djokovic an exemption from COVID-19 vaccination requirements to play in the Australian Open in Melbourne has been labelled appalling, with some players expressing surprise at the late decision. On Tuesday night, the defending Australian Open champion posted on Instagram that he was coming to Melbourne to participate in the tennis tournament with an exemption permission. All Australian Open participants must either be fully vaccinated or apply for and secure a medical exemption in order to enter Victoria without undertaking the mandatory 14-day quarantine. 045 Jamie Murray questions Novak Djokovic's Australian Open medical exemption video. Tennis Australia said tennis players seeking an exemption went through a two-stage process, with their application first considered by a panel of experts in Tennis Australia, and then an assessment from the Victorian government. Craig Tiley, CEO of Tennis Australia, said the exemption granted to Djokovic is the same medical exemption anyone can get under the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation, outrage, guidelines. If there are several reasons why they are unable to be vaccinated, outrage have set out very clear guidelines that have to be followed in order for you to be added to the Australian Immunisation Register, and if you are added to that register, you are then exempt from a vaccination and can come into Australia, he told Nine's Today Show. For tennis players, it was a process that was above and beyond what anyone coming to Australia would have experienced. Simply because we had an extra panel, which through a blind review assessed any application and then granted exemptions if it was appropriate. Tiley said it was up to Djokovic to decide whether to disclose the reason the exemption was granted. The outrage guidelines state exemptions can be given for those with acute medical conditions, including undergoing major surgery, those who have had COVID-19 in the past 6 months, or have had a serious adverse event attributed to a previous COVID vaccine dose. Former Australian Medical Association Vice President Stephen Parnas said the decision to give an exemption was appalling. "I don't care how good a tennis player he is. If he's refusing to get vaccinated, he shouldn't be allowed in," Parnas tweeted. If this exemption is true, it sends an appalling message to millions seeking to reduce COVID-19 AUS risk to themselves and others. Vaccination shows respect, Novak. Australian tennis players James Duckworth and Alex de Minaur expressed surprise at the decision when asked at the ATP tournament in Sydney. "Look, I don't know the criteria for exemptions." "Yeah. Apparently it's an independent panel. He must have fit the criteria somehow," Duckworth said. "That's very politically correct of you," de Minaur replied. "I just think it's very interesting. That's all I'm going to say." Tiley said 26 people associated with the Australian Open applied for a medical exemption to come to the tournament, but only a handful were granted. Deputy Victorian Liberal leader David Southwick said it was a disgrace. "What a disgrace. We have had 6 lockdowns, schools and small businesses closed, funerals and weddings told not to go ahead, families separated for months on end, and now a tennis star gets an exemption," he tweeted. "A kick in the guts to every Victorian." The decision also drew an angry reaction on social media, with many predicting a hostile welcome for the 9-time Australian Open champion when he takes the court. Whoever knocks Djokovic out of the AUS Open may never need to buy a beer in Australia ever again. Matt Walsh, at Matt Walsh Media, January 4, 2022. "I reckon the crowd reaction to this is going to be very unpleasant indeed. And they will have a heck of a time explaining the exemption grounds beyond him being Novak Djokovic." https:/t.co/IADOK8SF6M, Neil McMahon, at Neil McMahon, January 4, 2022. Former AFL great Kevin Bartlett said on Twitter that the public had been taken for fools. Russian tennis star Natalia Vukliantseva announced in December she would skip the Australian Open because the Sputnik vaccine she has received is not recognised in Australia. Just last month, Victoria's Deputy Premier, James Merlino, said exemptions on medical grounds should not be viewed as a loophole for privileged tennis players, and everyone at the Open is expected to be vaccinated.